Hello everyone, this is your subject Practical Research 2. So our discussion for today is about variables in research. Ano nga ba ang mga tinatawag nating variables na palaging inuulit-ulit ng inyong mga teacher? So I am going to discuss to you one by one. So researchers and statisticians use variables to describe and measure the items, places, people, or ideas they are studying. So ang mga dinedescribe ng mga researcher and statistician sa isang study ay tinatawag na variable. Many types of variable exist, and you must choose the right variable to measure when designing studies, selecting tests, and interpreting results. So, navavary or naiiba ang variable na ginagamit ng researcher depende kung anong type of research ang ginagawa niya, kung anong design ang gagamitin niya, at kung sino ang kanyang mga respondents. A strong understanding of variables can lead to more accurate statistical analysis and results. So before we start a research paper, we should familiarize ourselves with the different variables that we can use in our research. So ano nga ba ang variable by definition? So variables are things you can measure, manipulate, and control in statistics and research. All studies analyze a variable, which can describe a person, place, thing, or idea. A variable's value can change between groups or over time. So as I have said a while ago, a variable is the researcher's description to things, places, ideas, and many other sa kanilang research. Kung ano yung dinidiscuss nila sa kanilang research, yun yung mga variable. Pero, may mga types of variable. Ano nga ba ang mga ito? An independent variable is a singular characteristic that the other variables in your experiment cannot change. Age is an example of an independent variable. Where someone lives, what they eat, or how much they exercise are not going to change their age. Tama nga naman, di ba? Independent variable can, however, change other variables. In studies, researchers often try to find out whether an independent variable causes other variables to change and in what way. So ang mga tinatawag nating independent variable ay yung mga descriptions na ginagamit ng mga researcher na hindi natin pwedeng baguhin. As an example here, age, di ba? Ano pa? Color. Ano pa? Work experience, grade level, time of sleep. Ganon. So we cannot change those things. Ano naman ang mga dependent variable? A dependent variable relies on and can be changed by other components. A grade on an exam is an example of a dependent variable. Bakit? Because it depends on factors such as how much sleep you got and how long you studied. Independent variables can influence dependent variables. But dependent variables cannot influence independent variables. So sinasabi natin na mga independent variable ay pwede niyang maapektuhan ang dependent variable kasi they can change. Just like the example here, the grade on an exam. Ano ang mga independent dito? The factors affecting the grade on an exam. Ganon. What are the factors affecting the time of studying, mga ganon. The mode of learning, pwede din yung ganon, and many other things. Next one is the intervening variables. An intervening variable, sometimes called a mediator variable, is a theoretical variable that the researcher uses to explain a cause or connection between other study variables, usually dependent and independent ones. Mediator variable, sila yung mga nasa gitna ng independent and dependent variable. For example, if wealth is independent variable and a long lifespan is a dependent variable, the researcher might hypothesize that access to quality healthcare is the intervening variable that links wealth and lifespan. So we can say that intervening are those mga lumalabas na mga ideas in between the dependent variable and dependent variable. Next one is the moderating variables. A moderating variable changes the relationship between dependent and independent variables by strengthening or weakening the intervening variable's effect. For example, in a study looking at the relationship between economic status, which is the independent variable, and how frequently people get physical exam from a doctor, which is the dependent variable, age is a moderating variable. That relationship might be weaker in younger individuals and stronger in older individuals. So in the example here, the moderating variable is the age, di ba? Sinasabi dito that the younger the individual, the weaker the relationship. Bakit? Kasi lesser nagpapa-check up ang mga mas batang tao kaysa sa mga mas matandang tao. That's why it says here that the relationship between the dependent variable and the independent variable is weaker when the individual is younger kasi mas hindi sila nagpapa-check up. Unlike to older individuals in this example, the independent variable and the dependent variable has a stronger connection or relationship because mas nagpapa-check up ang mga matatanda. Next variable is control variables. Control or controlling variables are characteristics that are constant and do not change during a study. They have no effect on other variables. Researchers might intentionally keep a control variables the same throughout an experiment to prevent bias. An example is in an experiment about plant development, control variables might include the amount of fertilizer and water each plant gets. These amounts are always the same so that they do not affect the plant's growth. So in this example below, if the study is not all about the amount of fertilizer and water that you put on the plant, they are in the control variable. Kasi hindi naman yun yung ini-study mo. Kung ang ini-study mo is the amount of sun exposure, so you don't need to vary the amount of fertilizer that you put in the plant and the water that they get because hindi naman yun yung ini-study mo. It is the sun exposure. So the control variables ay nandun sa study mo pero hindi siya nakaka-apekto sa study mo. Next one, extraneous variables. Extraneous variables are factors that affect the dependent variable but that the researcher did not originally consider when designing the experiment. These unwanted variables can unintentionally change a study's results or how a researcher interprets those results. So, ang mga extraneous variables na sinasabi natin ay yung mga hindi inaasahang lumalabas na variables sa study natin. For example, a study assessing whether private tutoring or online courses are more effective at improving students' Spanish test scores. Extraneous variables that might unintentionally influence the outcome includes parental support, prior knowledge of a foreign language, or socioeconomic study. So, ang mga extraneous variables na sinasabi natin ay yung mga hindi inaasahang lumalabas sa study natin. So, the example here is, they are assessing the effectiveness of online tutorial and private tutorial in Spanish test scores. Ang mga extraneous na variables ay kung may parental support ba, may knowledge na ba sila about Spanish, and their socioeconomic status. So, ang mga extraneous variables ay maaaring makaapekto sa result ng inyong study. What is quantitative variables? Quantitative variables are any data sets that involve number or amount. From the word quantity, which is quantitative, it involves number or amount. Examples might include height, distance, or number of items. Researchers can further categorize quantitative variables into two. So, inuulit natin, ang quantitative variable ay ang mga it involves numbers or amount. Discrete and continuous. Ang discrete is any number or any numerical variables you can realistically count, such as the coins in your wallet or the money in your savings account. So, yung mga kaya mong bilangin. While in continuous, numerical variables that you can never finish counting, such as time. Ano naman ang mga qualitative variables? So qualitative or categorical variables are non-numerical values or groupings. Examples might include eye or hair. Examples might include eye or hair color. Researchers can further categorize qualitative variables into three types: binary, nominal, and ordinal. So as we repeat, qualitative variables or categorical are non-numerical, and quantitative variables are numerical or has an amount. Binary or binary. Binary variables with only two categories, such as male or female, red or blue. So binary variables under qualitative variables has only two categories, from the word bi, which is two. Nominal. Nominal variables you can organize in more than two categories that do not follow a particular order. Take for example, housing type, single-family home, condominium, tiny home, bungalow, mansion. Again, binary, two categories, nominal, has two categories, has two or more categories, but do not follow a particular order. Walang sinusunod. Okay? Ordinal. Ordinal variables you can organize in more than two categories that follows a particular order. Take for example, level of satisfaction. Unsatisfied, neutral, satisfied. So again, binary, only two categories. Nominal, more than two categories but do not follow a specific order. Ordinal, more than two categories but follows a specific order. So please don't forget the difference between nominal and ordinal. What is confounding variables? A confounding variable is one you did not account for that you A confounding variable is one you did not account for that can disguise another variable's effect. Confounding variables can invalidate your experiment results by making them biased or suggesting a relationship between variables exists when it does not. For example, if you are studying the relationship between exercise level and body mass index, but do not consider age effect on these factors, it's becoming a confounding variable that changes your result. So, confounding variable can be interrelated to extraneous variables. They sometimes appear to studies and they can influence the result of the study. Composite variables. A composite variable is two or more variables combined to make a more complex variable. Overall health is an example of a composite. Overall health is an example of a composite variable if you use another variable such as weight, blood pressure, and chronic pain to determine overall health in your experiment. So a composite variable is a combination of two or more variables. So what are the frequently asked questions about variables in research? So how many variables are in an experiment? Every experiment has at least two variables, an independent variable and a dependent variable. The independent variable is what you are testing, and the dependent variable is the result. Any other variables in your experiment build on or affect the independent or dependent variable. Most experiments also include a control variable. How do you control confounding variables? Yung mga sudden na lumalabas sa study natin. Those are confounding variables. So there are several ways to control confounding variables so that they do not affect the result of your experiment, including adjustment. Adjust study parameters to account for the confounding variables and minimize its effect. So kung nakikita mo ng parang makakaapekto ang variable na to sa iyong study, you need to adjust your parameter. Matching. Compare study group with the same degree of compounding variable. Multivariate analysis used when analyzing multiple variables at once. Randomization. Spread confounding variables evenly between study groups. Restriction. Remove subjects or samples that have confounding factors. And stratification. Create study subgroups in which the confounding variable does not vary or vary much. So these are the ways to control your confounding. You need to adjust, you need to match or rematch, you need to have multivariate analysis, randomization, restriction, and stratification. Thank you for listening. I hope you learned something from this discussion. Goodbye.